Welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina.
A podcast sparking discussion on all things health, mindset, fitness, goals, and motivation.
We strive to help you to boost your confidence, to take the lead in your own life, to back yourself, and to step into your full potential. Body and Beyond is proudly sponsored by The Seed Cycle. The Seed Cycle is a beautiful female-founded Australian company. Seed cycling is a natural methodology that you can use to support your menstruation and your ovulation, and it can even be used to support your hormones through perimenopause and menopause. Use the code BODY and BEYOND at the Seed Cycle website www.theseedcycle.com.au.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina. Today we have the amazing Leah Pardee. Welcome, Leah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we are so excited to speak with you. I've just been listening to some of your podcasts and so excited for what you're going to bring to us today. The main topic today will be being fully yourself and living unapologetically life on your own terms. So a topic you're very passionate about, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. It's something I just wrote a book about, pretty much was the whole topic of the book. And yeah, how I really have learned to live my life over the years.
Yeah. So Leah is an alignment mentor. She's a breathwork facilitator. She's an author. So please, Leah, take us away and just tell us how you got into, the topics that you cover in your book and how you started diving into breathwork and running the retreats you run, and how it all started.
Yeah, absolutely. So several years back, I guess it was about 4 years ago now, that I kind of started diving into all of the mindset stuff, and then the spiritual stuff came along and all of that. But before that, I was working in corporate and I was really, really like hustling my ass off. I was like grinding it away. First person in the office, last person to leave. I got 4 promotions in 4 years working in sales. Like I was so determined. Was getting my MBA on the side, just was like, I'm going to be an executive and I'm going to be like a vice president of, sales for a company. And that's like all great and fine and wonderful, but it wasn't really for me. Like it wasn't totally aligned. It felt like it just felt inauthentic. It felt like a lot of times in sales, working for like a multi-billion-dollar company, you're often pressured to do things and say things that go along with what the company wants, but not with what you want, And same with how I was like, managing my team. I ran a sales team. At one point I was a sales manager. So I felt like I always knew there was a purpose-led career that I could have, but I felt like I had to choose because it seemed like the options for working in nonprofits or working in a job that was very like purpose-filled, I wouldn't make very much money. And I wanted to make money. So I did the corporate thing and I hustled away, and I had a lot of stress. The job was like super like pressure, like I'll just quotas and just a lot of pressure. And so I had like really bad anxiety, and I just thought like, this is how life is. Everyone must have anxiety like this. Like, this is just what life is. Like, it seems like everybody that is like on anxiety meds or depression meds. Like it feels almost normal. Right. So I was just living life that way, coming home and like binge eating and drinking wine, just like anything to not really feel my feelings, which is so crazy to think about now. But yeah, so I was starting to get into mindset through that career path because sales is all about mindset. So I was reading those type of books and going to conferences that my company would send me to. But then I stumbled upon the book, The Secret, which is like funny because a lot of people say that, but that was kind of my first introduction to the law of attraction and manifestation. I thought, wow, like I have a lot more power over my life than I previously thought. Like this is really crazy. My mind was blown. And so I started right away reading more of those type of books and applying the principles and seeing very quickly how my life was changing. And I started meditating every day and journaling every day, just small bits, like 5 minutes in the morning of meditation, 5 minutes of journaling, like, because I was working like 60 hours a week. It was crazy. So yeah, and just my life was changing so much. Like my stress was going down, my anxiety was going down. I was just like, how does, like, why does nobody know about this stuff? Like, I didn't know anyone who meditated. I didn't know anyone who journaled, at least that talked about it, right? So it all just felt so foreign. And so I started a blog so that I could share these things and get people, to understand that there were these tools and resources available for us. And then very quickly after that, I became a life coach. So I was like, okay, this seems so much more aligned with my soul. Like I can help people, and I can like run my own business and have that freedom and flexibility. So I became a life coach. And then shortly after, I started my podcast, Bare Naked Soul, that sort of like replaced the blog that I had. And then, yeah, from there, it's just been pivoting and allowing myself to evolve. And I've had different like phases of the business where I've been really into one thing and then into other things. And now I host retreats. I just wrote a book. I have a journal with it's like a journal with prompts. I do a lot of things, do courses and coaching, and breath work is a big part of it as well. Teaching breath work and all of that. So yeah, it's just crazy thinking back to the person that I was, 4 or 5 years ago, just being so anxious and so stressed out and thinking this is just life until I retire in like 40 years.
I was going to ask, what was the time period? So yeah, you just said 4 or 5 years ago. And so what was the big pivotal shift that you had? Like you mentioned some of the behaviors you were exhibiting at that time in your life. Like what was actually that like catalyst for you shifting or going, I don't want this anymore?
It really was just learning that I just thought there was no other option. Like I didn't see any examples in my life of a different way to live. So I started listening to this kind of podcast, right? And hearing people talk about these things and being exposed to ways to like I went my whole life not realizing that feeling your emotions is part of how you can release them. And I had just been suppressing them constantly because I had no idea. So yeah, it was coming into the books and the podcast that talk about all of these things and just realizing like, oh, there's another way to live my life where I can have more freedom, be healthier, be happier, and I can like build a career out of this too. Yeah.
So true. And that's the thing, right? Like if we're not taught by our parents or our primary caretakers about how to access our emotions, then that's not necessarily always accessible to everyone, is it?
Yeah. And it's like we're taught the opposite, and we were taught be a big girl, don't cry, and especially for men, it was 10 times worse. So it's really beautiful to be a part of this movement of teaching and just like sharing our experiences of living life in a totally different way that makes so much more sense.
I would love to know, you mentioned just briefly before when you were chatting about finding purpose in what you do. When you say purpose, I guess I would love to know from you how was it breath work? Was it meditation? Was it a mixture of all these things that sort of allowed you to find that purpose? Or do you feel like you didn't have that at all before with what you're doing in corporate, and you needed to do a drastic change in order to find that and discover what that was?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I definitely didn't feel connected to purpose at all in my career. I mean, there's a little bit of the aspect of managing people that allowed me to, feel like I was like showing someone a positive way, because I got really into like, okay, I want to be a manager who like lets people like use their vacation time and doesn't like make them feel weird about taking time off. And I'm sure you guys know, like in the States, it's like really, it's probably, I don't know how exactly it is there for you guys, but it's like so an example would be, there was a guy who had a baby. He'd worked at this company for years, worked his way up into management, had a baby, and was telling his boss, like, yeah, like my wife just delivered the baby, like I'm going to take a few days off. And they were like pissed, like, no, you can't take a few days of your vacation time that we give you with your brand new infant. So that culture doesn't exist at every company, right? So like, it's not that corporate's all bad and the only way to be happy is to start your own business. But yeah, I was just like not seeing that anything else was possible for me at that time. And Yeah, so it really was coming across life coaching. I was like, I didn't know what it was. But when I found life coaching and I was starting to follow other coaches and listen to their podcasts and stuff, I was just like, this is something that I can do that really aligns with me. And I just didn't even, I would never have known to even, it's like, do you guys ever think of like the online world of this as like almost like a bubble? Like it's like it's a whole separate thing that I just had no idea existed at all.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And slowly there's multiple bubbles now, and slowly they're starting to connect and align. And I think, yeah, awareness is rising for sure.
I think so too. Yeah. I feel like now compared to like 4 or 5 years ago, like
Yeah.
people are like meditation's a lot more common. Breathwork's a lot more common. People are starting to realize there's like all these tools available.
There's also a lot more, I guess, a lot more research and studies and more, objective science around the benefits now of breath work. And so I think it's not so left field or woo woo sort of thing. It really is now being grounded in science, which is very cool, especially with people like Andrew Huberman, like scientists like him doing all the research that they do and tying that all together. So, very cool. So yeah, when did you step into breath work and more so going down that path and facilitating breath work within your retreats as well? Is that right?
Yeah. So I started meditation. That was like one of my first things, and I got really, really, really into it. And I learned about breathwork pretty quickly too, I think from a podcast. So I knew about breathwork, and I was going to people's like workshops online and like doing breathwork myself. And I started to realize, oh, this should come before meditation, because it's just, if you take a person who's in our world of constant noise, constant distraction, like sitting still is very uncomfortable for most people, like sitting still without your phone or anything, so trying to meditate is like trying to do nothing. And that's actually like the hardest thing you can do. Whereas with breath work, you're given something to do, like you're doing breathing exercises. It's very easy. Like you can't not be able to do it, but you're doing something. And I think that's such a better starting place for most people, because so many people will try to meditate and they'll be like, oh, like it doesn't, no, like never again. That didn't work for me. That's like, no. So not only is it easier to start with breathwork because you're like doing something, but it also shuts off the default mode network part of the brain, which is like the chatterbox, the constant, like never shuts up in your mind. And so like the overthinking, and it just puts you into a different like frame of mind. So that allows you then to be in that place of stillness and notice like what's really going on in my body, and like, how do I actually feel? And yeah, being in that like relaxed nervous system healing mode that your body naturally can be in. So I was like, this should come before meditation. And I was having people reach out to me all the time about meditation and asking like, what do I do? It's so hard. Like I can't do it. And so I was like, well, I'm going to become a breathwork facilitator so that I can lead people to this as really that starting place for tapping into the breath and tapping into stillness. And of course, like releasing repressed emotions, as breathwork helps us to do. So important. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so do you utilize breathwork on your retreats that you run? And also, is there what else is involved in those retreats?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we do breathwork pretty much. It's very like a foundational part of the retreat. So like we'll wake up in the morning and we'll usually do like a conscious connected breathwork session, which is you're like laying down and you're doing a certain breathing pattern for 20 or 30 minutes, and it really shifts your consciousness. And yeah, and that's like very deep healing. It can release a lot of repressed emotions. It can really, the experience is so different for everyone, but it's like a little bit trippy. So we do that kind of as like a foundational part of the retreats. And they've all been different. I did one in Sedona, Arizona, and we had like a masseuse. And yeah, it's just like always different things. The one that I have coming up in November in a few months here, we're doing like a photo shoot. This one's more about confidence and abundance. So we have like a hypnotherapist coming to do hypnosis sessions on feeling like you're living your uncaged life, living unapologetically, like owning who you are, owning your worth, confidence. And then we're going to like do the photo shoot to like practice embodying that. So And we're going to do like a cacao ceremony and just different things. So they've all been different, but breathwork is definitely like a big foundational part of it.
Great.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned your book, so Confessions of an Uncaged Soul. So when did you first have the idea of writing that book, and when did it start to develop and evolve?
Yeah, so I was a little girl and I always knew I'd write a book. I loved to read, was like super into reading, super into writing. But sadly, when I was getting older, I was just really focused on working, and I was really focused on so like in high school, it's like, you know how when it was like you had to pick your career when you're like 17, you like pick your college major and decide what you're gonna do for the rest of your whole life. I just was somebody who didn't believe I could do anything that wasn't like super practical, you know? So like I remember wanting to do like journalism or something with writing, but it's like, oh, well, like a lot of those people don't end up finding jobs that are secure, that they like, or you know what I mean? Or it doesn't pay very well. So I took the more like safe route. Always just took the route that was the most practical. And so I always knew that I would write a book, and I always felt like I would write a memoir. But I was like, when is something exciting going to happen in my life so I can write this memoir? And so, yeah, the idea was always there. I always knew, especially when I started like life coaching and, you know, podcasting, like I knew that it was going to come. But honestly, it was probably about a year and a half before the book came out that I started writing it. And probably 2 or 3 times I stopped writing it. And, you know, your mind it's like self-sabotage, right? So you have an excuse of, oh, maybe this isn't the right timing, or all the different excuses come up. And it feels like the truth to stop the process. But really it was just fear, you know? It's like such a permanent piece of content. So like, as we're constantly evolving on these journeys, our beliefs shift. They will keep shifting. Like, I'm not going to be the same person a year from now, in a good way. Like, I'm going to be more my true self. But so it's scary to put things in a book that it's just so like permanent, and who knows how I'm going to feel 5 years from now about that book, you know? So, and it's also very vulnerable. It shares a lot of stories that are like, you know, my life. So it was just terrifying. And so that was really hard for me to move into a place of feeling like really surrendered to the process, surrendered to the outcomes, and also feeling like I had to remind myself that this isn't that serious, right? Like, it's just art. Some people will like it, some won't. That's okay. Yeah. It's really not the end of the world. If I get a bad review or something, like, it doesn't fucking matter. So I really had to go into this place of like, what if I was just creating for the fun and the passion of it and the purpose of it, and not needing to be like, well, this has to be like the best book in the whole world, and you know, it has to become a bestseller, and there doesn't have to be like embarrassment. Like, I feel like a lot of my personal journey has been practicing letting go of the feeling of being embarrassed, because when you can live life where you just aren't worried about what other people think as much as you were before, that is so freeing. And now you can just live. So that process of deciding to just go for the book and not give a fuck, like, that really, really helped me a lot, to just be okay with the way things are and not, you know, need that validation from people and all of that. So yeah. And then the book is also about living uncaged, which like the comfort zone cage is like a big part of what we talk about in the book, and how your life is created by what's going on in your comfort zone with your thoughts and your beliefs and your actions. And it's always going to be uncomfortable to make moves outside of that comfort zone, and your mind will be sneaky as shit telling you to stay in that comfort zone cage. So it's all about like breaking free from that. So yeah, I think it's starting to thunder. But anyways, yeah, that's pretty much
very distracting. It's pretty powerful. I love that. My husband has written a book as well, and he's got 3 more that he's signed on with a publisher to write. But he mentions a similar thing, right? It's you're not attached to it forever, as in it's of course your name, but it's still demonstrating where you were at that point in time. And of course you're going to grow and evolve, learn more, shift some perspectives or values or beliefs as you know, time goes on. But I think no one's going to necessarily hold you to that moment in time and be like, no, you said this, because really so many people just get it, right? We're evolving and we're changing and we're learning, and it's like anything we do is just a snapshot in time of where we were at that point in time. So yeah, it's so beautiful.
I think that's quite common across the board as well. Like you hear, I often listen to a lot of, YouTube speakers or podcasts, or you read people's posts on social media, and often you will note, they will refer back to a post that's been years ago and say, hey, like my beliefs and my view has changed on this now.
Yeah. Or more research has come out.
Or I think differently. And that's just all a part of the journey and the process, really. Like we're all learning and we're all on a journey, and to be able to put that on paper for you now and sort of represent, where you are now at this point in time is quite special. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And think about all the amazing authors. Sorry, Leah, but I was just saying, think about all the amazing authors who wrote their first book 15 years ago and now they're on to book 7. Of course, everyone's on the same journey. Yeah.
Or they've updated an old
version, yeah.
Right? We have updates of books all the time where they
100%.
go back and done a new edition. So, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. It's also interesting because when I wrote this book, for one, I was in a book writing season, right? So I was giving myself a lot of time and space and stillness to write. And I was really in like a very flowy, very, very feminine state when I wrote this book, which I love because it's that, to me, like the things that are in this book, it's very foundational for a lot of people. It's like breaking free from perfectionism and people pleasing and workaholic and worrying what people think and like all of that. So it's very much about like the present moment and stillness and just like tapping into soul. It's very, very feminine. And so lately I've been feeling more into my masculine side, and my content is more like, all right, we're going to fucking do it. Like, more of the doing side, right? More of the like, let's like put this into place. Let's kick some ass. And so I've learned how to very recently, like, be okay with the fact that like, I'm going to show up differently at different days. I'm going to go through seasons where I like dress a certain way and then I dress a different way. Or maybe I show up in my more bolder masculine side, which people need and I need. And then and other times I'm more in my flowy feminine side, and like, that's okay. And that's human. And learning to just embrace all of it has just been so, so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And Leah, could you give us an example maybe, or a reminder somehow specifically related to being yourself and sort of breaking down those boundaries for those who are listening who might be thinking of circumstances where they find that really hard, or, they're finding it hard to be unapologetically themselves in whatever circumstance it might be, at work, it might be at home, it might be in a relationship. Do you have any sort of advice or tips or reminders for people who want to practice, being more unapologetically, sorry, I always have trouble saying that word, yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like you said, it's a practice, right? And so I think it's really important to reiterate that you're practicing. So I love journaling for any type of transformational work. I'm a huge fan of journaling. Like I use it as a tool almost every single day. So I would journal on, okay, when do I feel the most myself, right? Is there like a friend that when I'm around that friend, I show up a little differently, a little bit more me, or maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a significant other, maybe it's just anything, right? But when do I feel the most myself? For me, like looking back over the years, it's been one specific friend of mine where when I've been with her, things, and we both feel that way, like things are a little bit different, like we're able to be more of ourselves. And so how can we, okay, so what are the things, like then I would journal like, okay, what are the things that I like when I'm with other people? What's different? What am I hiding? What am I afraid to talk about? What part, like, what am I shying away from? Yeah, sharing about myself, or how am I muting myself around others? And so like I would journal all of that out and start to just bring awareness to it and notice like, wow, yeah, like I feel really uncomfortable talking about my, political things or money or my career or whatever it is around certain people. Like, what are those things? Because I just feel like hiding things and like shame, like it's like shame, it's like creating shame around who we are when we have parts of ourselves that we are afraid to share. And it's not that everyone needs to live a life where they just share everything to everyone and every aspect of their life. But when you inside of yourself, like, know you want to be sharing something, or know you want to be dressing that way or showing up that way or talking that way, and then you're suppressing that, you're like shoving that back down, you're like playing small, like that doesn't feel good, So I would journal on what are those things that I'm afraid to do and say and share. And then I would journal like if I could be my full self, like what would that look like? How would I show up? And then practice with intention when you're going into like social circles where maybe you feel a little bit more uncomfortable, practicing just bringing a little bit more of those elements out. Practicing sharing those parts. For me over the years, it's been really interesting going from having a normal corporate job that like you could talk about and people understood and people knew what kind of questions to ask about your job to like being an online coach, influencer type person. Mm-hmm. I've definitely felt like people just don't ask as many questions about it. And I used to be really insecure about that. Like, oh, do they think it's weird what I do? Like, I felt so uncomfortable at first showing up and suddenly being like a mindset coach and sharing all these things. What are friends and family going to think and all of that. So it could be something like that. It could be your, the way you identify sexually. It could be anything, but starting to first bring awareness to what things you're hiding, what things you're afraid to, like, how are you not being yourself? What does that even look like? And then what would it look like to be yourself more? And then just practicing that.
Thank you. Yeah, great advice, I think.
Pretty powerful. Yeah.
I always love that quote, like, people are always going to judge you anyway, so you may as well go ahead and do it or whatever. But I always think to myself, especially having like obviously a social media account, and often you'll get comments from people who view your things who might say something like, oh, I didn't think you would be like this, or oh, chatting to you is different, or you meet someone in person, they're like, oh, you're nothing like what I thought you were based on social media. And it makes you sometimes think like, oh, you never really know what the assumptions are of other people are going to be anyway, right? They could be completely different to what you think you're coming across as. You just don't know. So at the end of the day, all you can really do is just be yourself, and what other people think and what they see is really more of a basis of probably themselves more than anything and what they're interpreting, right? So
I was about to say it's such a reflection on themselves and how they see the world or how they judge themselves, so it's often highlighted in the way we see other people, what we think. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's so true. And it's like, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, Gina, I was going to say, I think we touched on this on one of your retreats with Dave, but basically sort of the example of seeing one person, two different people seeing one person in a complete different light, right? Like someone, you both hearing a conversation, you're both meeting the same person, but someone walks away with a complete different outlook as to what they think of that person, as the other person who just saw what was the exact same thing. So we all have a different perspective on things, I guess.
Yeah. And it even like, I love those saying, it's like the only thing we can be responsible for is our intention, right? We can't control how someone else perceives us, but we can control our intentions. So if our intentions are good and we're feeling aligned with them, then what the other person, how they interpret our message is a reflection of them. And people will often, I'm sure you guys like come across this too. And like when people are really discouraging when you want to like start your own thing or, do anything outside of that super normal box. And people will say like, oh, that doesn't sound like it's gonna be a successful business or whatever. But it's like when someone doesn't believe in you, it's really like they don't believe that they could do it. Like that's their reflection that they don't see that as a possibility. It doesn't mean it's not possible for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so true.
I was going to say, I would love to dive into as well social media while we're kind of on the topic of thinking about that. But We were going to chat about social media addiction, which is very prevalent in this day and time, obviously, and putting boundaries in place for time and energy and mental health around social media. What's your thoughts around this?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm sure I was addicted to social media before, like having my business, but having my business being so heavily like, I mean, it's basically all social media. It just got so, I mean, I was just like constantly seeking that validation, right? So I was like logging on to seek who had been validating me on Instagram. And I mean, it can be a lot of comparison that goes on. It can be a lot of like, there's a lot of fake stuff on the internet. So just be really careful and really mindful with like how we're taking things. And I just think it can be, obviously it's so addictive, and we have to really ask ourselves, like, what do I want my relationship with social media to be like? Do I want to check my phone unconsciously 800 times a day because it's just like an addictive tendency to pick up my phone and look at Instagram and then go to Facebook and then go to whatever and Snapchat? Do I want that? And what do I want my life to look like in terms of that? So for me, some things that I put in place, it's probably been like maybe 8 months or so by now, but I started not looking at my phone, not looking at any social media after 5 p.m. So it's like between like 8 and 5, I'll be active on social media, not first thing in the morning, and definitely not like at night, because I just need that like space to exist without just like constantly being on my phone. And I want to sit on the couch with my husband at night and like watch one TV screen, and not like us also being on our phones. So that one was a big one for me. And then also, I don't use social media most weekends. So like not every single weekend, but a lot of the time, like this past weekend, I signed off and just wasn't active on there. And it feels so, so, so good to just not have this pull to always be like reaching for the phone and reaching for social media. So yeah, it's definitely like, it's challenging to put into place, but I've found it so rewarding.
Of course. And I think there's, it's quite clear that constant use of technology and social media also comes with a lot of comparison, self-comparison, and, that doesn't help with mental health these days. I think one of the biggest things that probably a lot of people put themselves through is self-comparison, because they're constantly seeing what everyone else is doing on social media. And it can be hard on the mental health.
I can't imagine these kids growing up with Instagram.
It's so scary. It really is. Times have changed so rapidly. I do often find myself wondering how it is these days for kids at that age who are, already coming into that sort of lifestyle of Instagram and TikTok. And I've definitely put some things in place personally for myself over the last year or so with social media, because obviously my business is very much run across social media as well. So for a long time I did struggle with that, as you probably did as well. It's almost like finding your feet. Like you have to go through it and then you realize, okay, something's not really serving me here. And then you've kind of got to put those boundaries in place. For me, it's definitely time as well. So I won't check messages or social media for a big chunk of my morning, because I find like that part of my morning is sort of my time and space to like set my intention for the day, right? And I used to just get straight out of bed and go straight in and see what my messages were. And all of a sudden, you wake up and you're flooding yourself with everyone else's thoughts and what you've got to do for the day or any negative news. So for me, that was a big help personally in being able to start my day a little more stress-free. And then not actually opening messages or social media or anything like that until, later in the morning when I've done whatever meditation or walk or had some reading time or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like when I do that, it's just, okay, so if I like jump in too soon to social media and answering the messages, and then I'm just in work mode. And then like my morning routine goes out the door.
Yeah. Once you start, you're just like zoomed in for the rest of the day. So I've kind of like prolonged that process.
Yeah, it's so, so, so important.
Yeah. What about you, Gina? What's your experience?
I think, well, I just wanted to say as well earlier that it's like, the point about the younger generations, coming online sooner or having access to Instagram and, TikTok from like, what are they, 13, 14? Yeah, it's like, how do we teach, well, not we, but how do they understand that they are so beautiful and perfect the way they are, and just like almost removing this need to compare, or this desire to compare. I heard the other day, it's almost like if parents are so, financially stressed and busy, and there's less connection potentially, and less of that connection and that time with really strong role models, that it's almost like kids are seeking that role model elsewhere. Like they're seeking to learn and develop from, and obviously the web is huge, right? We can literally learn from anyone we choose to learn from. And unfortunately, these young people are being exposed to, sometimes maybe not the best role models, or the, learning from the best people. So I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Leah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I hadn't heard about that, but it makes so much sense, because even for adults, it's like thinking about who we are as an animal. Like we're like a pack animal with like a leader, just like a dog, like a wolf pack, like they follow the leader. And so like in tribal days, always for humans, we have subconsciously, without realizing it, seeked out a leader and wanted to be like them, and wanted to talk like them, dress like them, whatever. And so this is something that I've definitely struggled with in my journey, is like knowing that even as adults, like for us, like we are looking for leaders without realizing it, and we're doing it on social media, and we're wanting to be like that person, and wanting to, like, this is why influencer marketing is such a huge industry, because you think, oh, if I had that bag that she had, then I would feel the way that she does. And obviously that's like not true, but that's what we think. So it kind of, for me, it makes me think about like the responsibility to show up with integrity and to show up as a good role model. But that can also be taken to the extreme, where I have sometimes got caught up with like needing to be so real and like such a good influence, and like seeing really young people follow me and be like, okay, I better make sure I'm like the perfect influence for these people. And that's just not possible either. So that's what it makes me think of, is like that line that we have to walk, where like knowing that people subconsciously really look up to us more than they probably think they do.
I also think with social media, we're still in such an early day of where we're at right now in terms of like social media, TikTok and Instagram. I do have this, I feel like we're going to come full circle at some point, as in we're kind of getting to a point now where like people are becoming more aware of this, like they are becoming more aware of the addiction, the comparison and the negative sides to social media. And you see more and more of that popping up every day. And because people are going to become more aware of it, to me, it kind of feel like, well, we might do full circle, who knows? And we might, as a society, move forward in a different direction some way, and be able to encourage the younger generation to come up and be able to place more boundaries around it. But I feel like right now we're obviously still in the midst of like learning and trying to live with it, and trying to kind of fumble through that, I guess. Because really, like Instagram, I think I must have been like 16 or something when it came out. So really not that long ago, right? Like it's brand new. We're still kind of living through the news of it all, I feel. So yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen with all the social media and all the technology. Like thinking back to like the early 90s and how different things were, like no cell phones, no Uber, no Airbnbs. Like I don't know how people lived. Like I truly don't know how you drove your car without a GPS. Like I honestly have no idea how you found your way around a town. And it's just like how much we've jumped in technology since then. Like imagine if we jumped that same amount. Like I don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But the important thing is that, we are becoming more aware of it, and we are trying to put those things in place and doing things exactly like what you mentioned, just trying to really connect with ourselves and be, I guess, genuine in that aspect.
Be authentic. Yeah.
Be authentic. That's the word I was saying. Yeah.
So cool, Leah. So for our listeners, if they were to come and find you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, that would be social media, which is still
Surprise.
good for some things, right?
Yeah.
So my Instagram is Leah Pardee, and you can type my name in basically anywhere and find something. My website's leahpardee.com. My podcast is Bare Naked Soul. So yeah, those are all good places to start.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed
the
topic. Yeah. Great. Well, if anyone has any questions about today's podcast, feel free to pop it in our Facebook community group. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you in our next episode. Thanks again, Leah.
Thanks
Thanks,
guys.
Leah. Bye.
The Body and Beyond podcast is for information purposes only. This podcast does not constitute advice or services, and the statements and views of the hosts and guests are not medical advice. The information provided should not be used for treatment or diagnosis purposes. Please discuss any information from this podcast with your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle.